Well, hi everybody. My name is Sabrina Bong. I'm in 8th grade here at Wellington, and I'll be co-hosting this panel with Shivam. On behalf of the Wellington community, I'd like to welcome all the panelists and tell you how excited we are to have you here for an hour and a half to talk about your incredible careers and what it means to be Asian American. Before we get started, I just wanted to list a few of the things that we've been doing here at Wellington, aside from this panel, for our first ever celebration of AAPI Heritage Month. So at our weekly division-wide morning meetings, we've been showcasing an Asian American professional and talking a little bit more about their accomplishments. We've also had a local Japanese American activist who is the parent of an alumni actually, come and speak to the students about the rise in anti-Asian hate crimes. She is also providing the students with an opportunity to attend a demonstration in solidarity with the movement against anti-Asian hate. And in more lighthearted stuff, we're doing a screening of the movie Free Diving, which is a documentary about a Filipino diving sport, as well as, of course, playing K-pop in the halls and some Bollywood soundtracks. And of course, we have this incredible panel gathered here. One of our main objectives when planning out this month was to showcase excellence within the AAPI community, and I cannot think of a group better suited to do that. So I am incredibly excited that all of you are here with us. I'm now going to turn it over to Shivam just to go over some Zoom technicalities. You know how it is with the tech these days, and then we can get started.
Hello, I'm Shivam and I'm an 8th grader, and I'm going to talk about some technical details on the agenda and other parts of the APPI panel. So there are bios of each of the panelists with some background info on them if you would like to read them to get to know a little bit more about them before we start. The agenda is as follows. First, the panelists will go through their introductions, and then Sabrina and I will pose some questions to the panelists. Then we'll open it up to questions from students, teachers. If you would like to ask a question, go up to your teacher and tell them. They'll unmute the DPP when the time comes. Teachers, please use the raise hand function when you are ready. If you are learning from home, please type your questions in the chat and send it to either me, Shivam, or Sabrina. Now I'll pass it back over to Sabrina to get the show started.
All right, Shivam and I are actually going to step out of the way now and let the panelists introduce themselves. Shoot for like 3 to 5 minutes, but yeah, just give us a brief introduction of your work and a little bit about yourself.
Should I go first?
Totally, Uncle Barry. Oh, Mr. Fong, sorry.
Hello, cousin Sabrina, how are you? So my name's Barry Fong. I'm a film director. I make documentary films. I've been making them about over 10 years, mostly about the Asian American experience. And I think you have a trailer to show for me.
Yeah, I think that we have that pulled up somewhere in the tech desk.
Maybe show it at the end.
Yes, absolutely. Give me just 1 second. I started looking for the captain of this liquefied natural gas carrier that rescued my family from the South China Sea in 1980.
We found no food. If I remember right, the water was down to almost nothing.
The Vietnamese who were lucky enough to leave with those American vessels can only forecast the dark years to come for those of us left behind.
We were on the ocean for 10 days. Many ships went by, and we tried to flag, we tried to put the fire on just to get their attention so they can help us, but no help.
The buckets that were passed around to catch vomit didn't quite make it in time all the time. I think we all tried, but we were confined to the pit and the merciless tossing of the boat.
When Kenny and I come up to the main deck, we were nauseated.
Our lives would have ended there, within days, on the ocean, in the darkness of storms, hunger, and desperation. We would have been like the million other boat refugees who never made it to shore. Their voices were extinguished forever.
2007, with the help of the internet and a really good researcher, we found George Overstreet. I left this message and I said, Captain Overstreet, my name is Lauren Vu. I think you were the captain who saved our lives in 1980. I just wanted to call and tell you that I've been looking for you. And I want to thank you. At last. At last.
At last.
Thank you.
I don't consider myself, a hero. I think what the people on those boats went through, I think you people are the heroes.
Wow, that was incredible, Mr. Fong. Do you want to continue with your introduction?
No, I'm looking forward to the rest of the day, and I actually want to thank the Wellington administration for making such a big effort for AAPI month and stopping this day so that we can talk to you all. Thanks very much.
I'll go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Cindy O. Young. I am the current Vice President of Inclusion, Equity, and Belonging at Robinhood, which, if you're not familiar with it, is a investing mobile app. So that helps people basically invest and purchase stocks. So I've been at Robinhood for just a few months now. I'm relatively new here. Prior to Robinhood, I've held an almost 20-year career in driving different talent, diversity, and inclusion programs and initiatives at lots of different companies. So I've done it mostly inside tech companies, both startups and global companies. You might have heard of a couple of them. Fingers crossed, some of you actually use some of them, Yahoo being probably the most familiar to many people. And most recently, I was at Charles Schwab, which is another financial services institution that does broad investing as well as banking services and things like that. Talent and inclusion is actually my second career. My first career was in marketing. So when I first graduated from college, I went to go work for ad agencies doing consumer research and bringing that point of view to how we develop advertising campaigns. And I got the chance to do that for some really amazing brands like Apple and Levi Strauss. And that was a lot of fun, but I decided after 10 years of doing that I wanted to do something that was just personally more fulfilling and satisfying. And that's why I went into the diversity, inclusion, and human resources work that I am doing today. So I am thrilled to be here to share more about my career journey, answer whatever questions come to mind for all of you. And I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Hi, I'll go next, everybody. My name is Valerie Gordon, and I just really want to thank Wellington for hosting this panel. This is amazing. Barry, that piece just really got to me, I've got to tell you. That was incredible. So what do? I own a company called Valerie Confections that is based out of Los Angeles, California. I'm a chocolatier, pastry chef, food personality, and social justice person. I'm completely self-trained in baking and chocolate making. And I have to say that my gung inspired me to go on a path of giving people treats. And this inspiration, I really looked to my career starting when I was 6 years old, and in a car with my mom, who was the interpreter on a visit with my gung and papa. And my gung had a box of See's chocolates, which for any California natives, we know that See's is the mothership. And I was like, why is gung bringing chocolates to the lawyer? And he said in Chinese, never go empty-handed. And this is a message that I carry in everything that I do. And it really fueled this passion of mine to create beautiful gifts for people. And I do that through shocking chocolate. In the last, well, I will also say that I have a minor in Asian American Studies, which I got at San Francisco State. And during my time in college, which was so very long ago, I also interned for the Asian American Film Festival. And in the last, I would say decade of my career, I've really started to use my platform as a mentorship for people, particularly with an organization called No Kid Hungry, where we address issues of food insecurity amongst kids across the country. And in the last 5 years, I've become very involved in the AAPI community, mostly calling attention to the culinary heroes of the AAPI community. And in the last year and a half, spearheading fundraisers so we can draw a lot of awareness towards these horrible injustices that are happening towards our community, the racism that we're all dealing with, and really being a supportive voice as much as I possibly can. So I'm thrilled to be here and learn about your school and learn from these other panelists and talk about our experience. So thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. I'm Desmond Pio. First of all, let me thank Wellington School for this opportunity. What a wonderful setup, and to be with such distinguished panel. I want to be a chocolatier, movie maker, at the same time work in a PE company like Robin Hood, but that will be my next dream, I guess. Yeah. But I was born actually in Papua New Guinea. I don't know how many of you have been to Papua New Guinea. I grew up in Papua New Guinea, and actually when I was 9, 10 years old, we moved to Singapore. As you all know, Singapore is a multinational, multicultural, multi-ethnicity place. So grew up there. Later went to Canada for my studies and US, and what an amazing country. Stayed here. Worked and continue to try to contribute to the society, and so happy to be in this panel together. My son Joshua Teo is actually in class right now. Maybe we'll say hello to everybody afterwards. But I'm based in Columbus, worked in Irvine, California, in an exciting area for those who wants to be in the science area, especially in genetics or oncology area, cancer research area. Right now, our research is in this part, and an amazing area, an amazing contribution to society. We'll talk about that later if anybody has questions, and looking forward for the panel. Thank you.
Wow, thank you all for introducing yourselves. Wow, yeah, such an incredible panel here today. So we've just got a few questions for you now. Any of you feel free to jump in and answer, and totally feel free to add on to what other people say. You know, we want this to be a conversation between you guys. So our first question is, how has being part of the AAPI community inspired or enhanced or influenced your work?
Hi, I'll jump in on that one. This is Valerie again. And as I said in my intro, so much of, I would say specifically Chinese American culture has really fueled what I do. And it really did start when I was 6 years old with my gung saying, never go empty handed. And this really is a message that is something that I share very frequently, just the necessity of gifting, generosity, and caring for people that are around you. Something that also has been really interesting that I think is indicative of the AAPI community is a sense of true community. And this is something that I've seen really fuel a level of creativity, particularly in the culinary world, where I'm constantly in these groups of AAPI chefs, food makers, and we collaborate to create something unique, shared, and really delicious for people that might be in, the area where we're serving something like that. So I would say that has been really, really important. I would say also using a level of respect in everything that we do, and really going back to previous generations, I think has a lot to do with the AAPI narrative of really paying respect to the generations before us. And I think particularly in food, we always look back as we look forward. And I think that has been just a driving force in what I do. And if I wasn't Chinese American, I don't know if I would have that same philosophical attribute in what I do.
Thanks so much for that, Valerie. I very much share a lot of that sentiment. I'm also Chinese American. My parents immigrated here before I was born, and so I am an American-born Chinese. Growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is, a very multicultural place. I was very aware of how the culture that I experienced at home, being Chinese, was significantly different from the culture I experienced outside of my home, right? In this majority kind of American culture that is very much defined by individualism, it contrasted really sharply with what I was taught at home, which is all about family and community and making sure that you consider the whole before you consider yourself. Growing up with that sort of duality, right? This bicultural identity, being Asian and American, is really one of the things that drove me to the career that I have today. I never felt like I fit in anywhere. I was not Chinese enough for my Chinese-born friends. I was not American enough for my American-born friends. And so there was always this in-betweenness, and whether this feeling of, do I belong and where do I belong? And it's that is that's driven me to a career where I am constantly working to help people feel like they belong somewhere, right? So the work that I do, inclusion, equity, and belonging, is really about creating safe spaces for people, creating connections to each other in their workplaces, creating access, equal access to opportunities from a hiring perspective, from a promoting perspective, how do you advance in leadership, and creating these communities of support for people so that they can feel included and feel like they're not the odd person out. And so, being Asian and being American, like that is a core reason why I do the work that I do, because I know what it feels like to not feel like you are part of that in group, right? And so, I think being Asian American in particular, and growing up with some of those values, right, that's also very much influenced how I work, right? I'm very collaborative because I think about the community, because I think about the whole. I'm also really big picture oriented, for those same reasons, right? I like to look at like all of the pieces of a puzzle and see how they can fit together so that they can actually become more than the individual pieces. And that's a driving philosophy for how I approach my work and just how I approach life in general.
Barry, please.
Okay, thank you. I probably should have included in my introduction that I am also Chinese. I am a fourth generation Chinese American. My great grandparents landed in California in 1898. So we have a long history in California. I was born and raised there, and so what I do basically, I'm a filmmaker, but really what I am is a storyteller. And my great grandparents and grandparents were incredible storytellers. We, always had the family tradition of having dinner together, and after dinner they would launch into these stories about their childhoods or their youth, and that probably is what inspired me to continue telling stories. And so being Asian American for me, it gives me access to all of these stories around the Asian American experience, or Chinese, Koreans, Japanese, Thais, Vietnamese. These are experiences that I think are different than the mainstream American experience. And so I get access to those things, and I think it informs how I view those stories. And hopefully what I'm doing is helping the mainstream understand what those experiences were like, and they are different than, adding on to what Cynthia was saying, different than the mainstream. So go ahead, Desmond.
Yeah, wow, wonderful. I came from a very big family, actually. My parents have 11 children, imagine, 11 children. The first 8 are all boys. And so grew up with 4 elder brothers, 3 younger sisters, and 3 younger brothers too. So it's always noisy at home. Trying to find a corner to have a quiet place to do your things is not easy. But as in many families, our parents are very strict in times and teach us some of the what you call family values with regards to being honest, to be ethical, to help others, etc., etc. I still remember one of the things my mom said. I said the Bible says, "Love thy neighbor, love your neighbors," and it doesn't matter what color of the skin, just love them all. So growing up in Papua New Guinea, growing up in Singapore does help understand with multicultural, multiracial, it is actual, and multi-religion too. I got a good upbringing in understanding that. And so living in the US, I was very lucky in a sense. I understand what's going on, although it's a complicated society, obviously, but what an opportunity to be here.
Thank you for all those great responses. So now let's move on to the second question. What is one myth about the APPI community you would like to dispel?
All right, since I was the last one last time, I'll be the first one this time. But I think one of the first things I realized that when people talk about AAPI, they say, oh, Chinese or Japanese, but actually Asia is so large. I mean, we have from India, we're from Pakistan, from Malaysia, not only China, Japan, Philippines, Indonesia, you name it. So one of the myths that I thought when we're talking, even at work, even at school when I was studying, to tell that Asia is actually pretty large. And actually in the US, probably there's more than 50 ethnicities from Asia alone. And we brought in so many foods I love to eat. So food is just one area that you can enjoy, from Thai food to Malaysian food, to Indonesian food, Filipino, not Chinese, Japanese food. I love sushi. So it's the myth of just Asia being more, Chinese is not. It's so many and Pacific Islanders too. I grew up in Papua New Guinea, as mentioned earlier, and we are very different over there. But I have a lot of good friends over there. and our buddies over there. So, and the food is great too. So I think one of the myths I'm trying to talk about is Asia is large, and we have to encompass that.
Can I suggest to the panelists that we just go back and forth in order?
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Okay. So, so the myth I would like to dispel is that we're not all good at math. In fact, some of us are very bad at math. And if you look out in the careers that are here, I'm sure Dr. Theo is great at math, but I'm not. And so there are filmmakers and storytellers and cooks and chocolatiers and HR people and all these great careers out there that that we do that are not around math. But I think that's a funny way to answer the question. The serious way to answer the question is, I would encourage all of you as young people to try to see everyone around you as individuals, and to fight to resist the urge to categorize or generalize. I think it's our human nature to categorize people because it's easier. But you know, I'd encourage you. You are the next generation. You have a chance to change the world by seeing each other as individuals across the world, across the entire planet. You can see each other as individuals, and I think the world would be a better place if we could do that.
I love what you just said, Barry. So true. You know, I think that, you know, related to the we're all good at math, like there's an expectation or a stereotype that we're all like doctors, lawyers, and engineers, right? And I grew up with that in my own community. And my parents had that expectation for me, and I did not obviously go that route because I wasn't that great at math. I couldn't stand the sight of blood, and I couldn't argue my way out of a courtroom if my life depended on it. So it was just none of those options were really where my strengths lie. And you know, really, when I told my parents that I was going into business, they were kind of like, oh, okay, I guess that's the next best thing after those 3 occupations, if you're not going to do one of those. And one of the reasons why I decided to go into the work that I do, even though it was marketing and then human resources now, the common thread throughout all of that is that I've always been curious about people, right? And I'd love to learn about what motivates people to change their behavior, whether that's buying something or whether that is creating more opportunity for people who are not like yourself. So, you know, I'm definitely in the space of highlighting your own strengths and discovering your own individuality, and making sure that when you look at other people, you are judging them for what they are bringing and not what they look like. Right? Or what your assumptions are of them based on what you've seen in the media or in the news or on social, right? Because we are all so much more than just even the 4 representations of Asians that you're seeing here on the panel, right? And I think to Desmond's point, Asian comprises over 17 million people across 50 different races and ethnicities. There is such a diaspora of difference across this monolith that most people consider Asian. And we don't all know Kung Fu or karate or anything like that. And we're not all quiet either, right? I think you've got like these amazing 4 articulate people on this panel that are showing you that we're here and we speak up, and we're not just like sitting in the back of a room waiting to be asked something. That is another thing that I just think, you know, people need to get out of that myth around, right? That it's better to be quiet when, in fact, especially now, especially given recent events where you see all of this anti-Asian rhetoric and incidents happening, and you know, it's so important that we all speak up and we all speak up for each other.
So good. So good. This is really exciting stuff. So I'm actually half Chinese. And this is something I would love to address with the group here, because I think there's probably a ton of biracial people at Wellington School. When I was growing up, my sisters and I were the only half Asian people that we knew. And we were true other. And I actually checked a box growing up called other non-white because there was absolutely nothing to describe me. And I wrote a big old paper about that in college. Anyway, a myth I would love to dispel is that we're not American. And this is something that I've heard over and over and over growing up. The first question that is so interesting that I've gotten literally thousands of times in my life is, what are you? Before somebody knows my name, what are you? And I think that as Asian Americans, that's a question we all need to be looking at. And what is that question? And why are we being asked to define ourselves before people know our names? I think it's a really, really provocative thing. And something that I also have heard repeatedly in my life is, oh, your mom's Chinese and your dad's American. And I say, well, my mom's American too. She was born in San Francisco, actually. She's totally American. So American meaning white. And this is something that we are all working on right now, I think, and really sort of knocking down these old definitions of what it means to be American. And so I would say the myth that we're trying to remove right now is that the Asian community is an American in some reason. And this is something that's caused historically so much pain for, Japanese Americans, for Chinese Americans, for across the board. So I would say that is a big area of work and something that deserves a lot of awareness.
Wow, thank you all for those great responses. Actually, Valerie, what you said just now actually leads into our third question, which is, what barriers or challenges have you guys faced in your careers because of being Asian American? Oh, sorry, do you want to start, Dr. Theo?
Oh, okay. So barriers. I mean, throughout living in different countries, right? I've lived in many countries. There are barriers, obviously, in different societies. But if you're looking at that have been living in U.S., there are barriers. But I would say mostly in the workplace, where I see opportunities that perhaps there are what we call glass ceiling situation, where we think we can move up there, and how hard you work, we're not able to get there. But I would say slowly, as people understand your capability, my capability, and things that we can do, we tend to be able to break those barriers. But it needs communication. It needs lots of communication. What we're doing right now today is very, very good. And I wish that many years ago, we at school, at work, could do more panels like this, to be open, and not only for Asian American and the Pacific Islanders, but also other ethnic groups, for our brothers and sisters from Europe, European countries, Eastern European countries, Southern America. I mean, many areas that we have to have such a communication panel that we can able to discuss openly, because this is a global company. No man's an island. Yeah, and it is important that we look at those, but not look at barriers, I would say.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. I think that's a great answer. And there are certainly barriers with any career, and anyone trying to create anything. I think there's always difficult barriers. And I would add on to what Dr. Theo is saying is, but by focusing on your own strengths, and that's what I've done, is try to focus on my strengths, and being Asian is one of those strengths. And I think, as Cynthia was saying, the values, the culture set, those are things that I use to make my work better and to make me be better around other people. And actually having people like Cynthia doing her job is part of breaking that ceiling. So I'll pass it on to you.
Thanks for that, Barry. Good segue. I think for me, it's super interesting because there's external and then there's internal challenges, right? Like for me, from an external perspective, I don't look like a typical corporate leader. Which I think, Valerie, you mentioned, like American is like usually white, male, straight, tall. And here I'm this like skinny, petite little Asian woman that just doesn't sort of fit into that profile or that mold. And people don't expect me to have a voice in meetings. People are usually surprised, when I come into a room and own it with confidence, right? Because there's this perception of, the meek, obedient Asian woman that tends to be an old prevalent stereotype out there, right? And so I actually take a lot of pleasure in blowing past those stereotypes and upending people's perceptions of what a leader looks like. Now, I also think, though, that because of some of those stereotypes and perceptions, that has been a challenge and a barrier to holding, for me to sort of get the advancement in my career that has taken me longer than I expected. Right? Because I did used to, and this is the internal piece, more so than the external piece. I used to think that if I worked hard, that somebody would notice it and they would promote me. And what I realized was that I was holding myself back in that regard. Like I actually needed to advocate for myself. I had to make my work visible. I had to get comfortable with self-promotion around the work that I did and how good it was and the value that I contributed to the business and the people around me. And as I grew in that respect, I got better and better at it. Then I recognized that I was now being perceived by other people in a very different way. How you get perceived is really driven by how you show up in a lot of ways, in addition to kind of your ability to blow past some of those stereotypes, right? So for me, it's very much a growth and maturation process over time. I don't beat myself up too much over that, right? But it's also about just, being authentic to who you are and showing up in a way that other people can recognize that authenticity, right? So, I think that there's that element of making sure that I think Barry said this as well, like knowing your strengths, or maybe Desmond might have said it, like knowing your strengths, using it, leveraging that, right? And really leading with that, I think can help lots of anybody thinking about whatever career you're choosing for yourself, right? To achieve whatever aspirations and goals that you have.
Cynthia, I just love everything you're saying. I was like, go, go, go. Something I always tell my staff is ask for what you want. Ask for what you want. And I say this repeatedly to, I call them kids in their 20s and in their 30s, because no one ever said that to me. It was more do good work and see what happens. And through trial and error, I realized that no one was going to invite me to the party, that I had to invite myself to the party. And I can't get on a bigger soapbox about that to the student body of Wellington. Don't apologize for who you are. Don't do it. Get up there and be so proud. Obstacles, in my industry, which is the food industry, I would say there's just massive walls around women historically, and also women of color. And I've definitely had a lot of interesting situations where I co-own Valerie Confections with my husband, who is a large white man. And extremely large. And early on in the company, people would assume that he was the CEO, which I am, or that he was the lead person in the company, which I am. And there was a lot of sort of retraining of perspective around that, which was really interesting. And as my career has grown, doing things like chef events around the country and stuff like that, there's been so many times where it's 5 or 6 very large white men and me. And what I realize is, oh, when that chef picture is happening, I'm standing front and center instead of on the end. And so I sort of pushed myself to the front, and guess who stands out in that photo? Me. Because I'm not a large white man. And so it's actually helped me a little bit, I found, in the last few years. And it is that great thing, as Cynthia was saying, of celebrating who you are and what you do. And, I've definitely had events where, that group of large white men just tried to mute me. And it is unfortunate what a battle that can be sometimes, where you really have to stake your claim and not back down. And that's the deal. That's the deal. And that's what we have to do. So stand tall and be loud. Right on.
Thank you for all those great responses. So now we're going to open it up for Q&A. So as I said earlier, if you're a student and you have a question, you're on campus, just tell your teacher and they will raise the hand of the DPP. If you're a teacher, just raise the hand of the DPP. And if you're learning from home, just type it in the chat to either me or Sabrina, and we'll ask the question.
We have a question. How hard is for Mr. Fong? How hard is the process of movie making? Producers like you make it look so easy, but could you describe the biggest challenges that you face?
It's a hard business. And just for example, the film, the little trailer you saw, Finding the Virgo, we started production in late 2016. And just this month, did that movie get onto public television. So it's been a long process, and we're competing against about 2,000 films for that spot to get on public television. There are about 2,000 other films that are competing, so it's tough. But making a film, I will also encourage all of you, making the film has become a little bit easier now because of digital technology. And there are some films being made out there with iPhones because the cameras are so good now. And so what I would encourage all of you to do, because I'm interested in family history, is to, if your grandparents are still around or your great grandparents, talk to them at after dinner, pull out your phone and record half an hour of them telling you about their childhood or their childhood home or their first job. These things tend to disappear year by year, the details. So if you have this great opportunity now with digital technology to start being your own filmmaker. And you might find later in your life that that footage becomes very, very valuable. That's a great question. Thank you.
I'd like to call in the DPP whose name is Bill Nye.
That's Miss Burkhalter's room.
Hi, Miss Burkhalter.
All right, my camera's here.
I was wondering if there were people who who were Asian American at the schools you went to. That was.
So did you have a lot of Asian Americans that went to school with you? I know one person answered that question in their intro.
So I can share, like, I actually, my parents, when they immigrated, we settled in a primarily Black neighborhood. And my elementary school had a pretty diverse student body. You know, lots of Black folks, Asian folks, Latino folks, really kind of the whole, a really good diverse mix. Similarly with the middle school that I went to. So I've grown up with a lot of multicultural communities in my early schooling. I would say it wasn't until I got to high school that the diversity mix really dropped off, actually. And I happened to go to a high school that was predominantly white and Asian. So you know, that's the first sense that I started to get of, oh, you know, this is like really a little bit like monocultural here. And you know, it made me really miss sort of my earlier environments for sure.
Yeah, I don't know how many of you guys been to Columbus, Ohio. Actually, Columbus is quite diverse by itself. And when I was at Ohio State, over 55,000 students. But in our class for preventive medicine, we are quite diverse. We have African American, we have Asian American, we have you know, Caucasian American, many diverse groups. It was a fabulous discussion because we're talking about public health, and right now in the middle of pandemic, those things really come out because the virus doesn't care what color you are, and disease doesn't matter what color you are, what language you speak, what religion you belong to. They just come after you. So it is you know, when growing up with a diverse group does help.
I attended a predominantly white middle school and high school with only a few Asians, and I certainly know what that feels like. So I would encourage any of you who feel like you are one of few in your school or your group that, you know, you'll have things you need to work through. But I also think that it's an advantage to use it to your advantage. You have things that other people don't have. You have a family life that's different. You have culture that's different, and to try to use those strengths to get yourself through those.
Thank you to all the panelists who responded to that. I'd like to call on DPP 11. This is a little bit odd, I know. It's the Zoom era.
Hi, I have a question for Valerie. What's your favorite confection you make that explains you and who you are?
Hi, that is such a good and hard question. Oh my God. Wow, vex me. I would say it's not technically a confection, it's a cake. Something that I do is I resurrect old desserts that where bakeries or restaurants are no longer here. And so I do something called dessert anthropology. And I go through a lot of research around the recipe itself, the establishment, and ingredients that were used during the time. And the first one that I did this process with was a cake called the Blum's Coffee Crunch Cake. And this is a, there's a big fan base for this cake. It's kind of great. Sent one to my mom for Mother's Day. But this is a cake that historically was sort of co-opted by a lot of the Chinese American bakeries in San Francisco, specifically the Phoenix Bakery. And what it is it's a chiffon cake with coffee whipped cream and coffee honeycomb on the exterior. So I brought this cake back to life. And, you know, I think this really has a lot to do with how I approach dessert, because it has to do with family history. That cake to me tastes like Chinese New Year. It tastes like the day after Christmas when I would eat the leftovers. And I very much connect it to celebration in childhood. And now it's shipped all over the country. So great. Everyone can have this cake again. So it's really about keeping these recipes alive and the traditions alive through food. Thank you.
Valerie, I'm going to be in Irvine next week. I'm going to drive up to LA and get that piece of cake.
Okay. I'll feed you.
All right.
Valerie, before we move on to the next question, I just want to mention that for Mother's Day this year, actually, we went and found the recipe that you have online and made the coffee crunch cake for my mom for Mother's Day. And it was our first time making it. It went really well and she loved it. I just wanted to drop that in there.
Incredible. I love it. Thank you, Sabrina.
Yeah. Thank you for such an amazing recipe.
The Bill Nye DPP can go again.
Do you consider yourself an introvert or an extrovert, and how has that affected both your career and maybe even speaking up for yourself?
I'll go real quick. I'm both, and I think, as Cynthia was saying, the expectations are to be quiet as an Asian. So I think through school, the expectation was to be quiet, and in my chosen career, I had to change myself to be more of an extrovert to be able to do something like this. And it's all possible. If you feel like you're an introvert, you can certainly train yourself to be an extrovert, and then take a nap after you're done.
I'll go next. I definitely lean extrovert. I went to a predominantly Asian American high school, and I found myself to be one of the loudest there, I have to say. I don't know. That's all.
I love it. So I'm definitely an introvert, which for folks who are more familiar with sort of the psychology definition of that is it's about where you get your energy. Like, do you derive energy from being around other people, right, which is more extroversion, or do you get energy more from being from within, right? And I am definitely an introvert, because after I do things like this, I am extremely tired. Extremely tired. But I can present extroverted, meaning, like, people who interact with me have no idea that I'm actually an introvert, and I prefer to just curl up on the sofa with a good book to read as opposed to going out with friends. I get more energy from alone time, right? And that's how I recharge. But whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, like, I think that doesn't necessarily define, like, as you can see from me, like, it doesn't define how you interact with others. I think there's a lot of ways that you can learn different capabilities across both.
Yeah, for me, that's such a good question. Growing up in a family with 10 other siblings, if you're an introvert, you become extrovert very fast, or else you won't get any food to eat, no toys to play. So I still remember when I went to school in Canada, in Nova Scotia, and in one of the first class in mathematics, actually in math class, the professor was asking questions, and then a couple of Asians sitting at the back, we dare not to raise our hands, but folks in the front, even they do not know the answers, they're raising their hands and participating in the discussion and how to answer. And I said, we have to get in. We know the answers, so we have to get in. That's how an introvert become an extrovert very quickly.
I like that, Dr. Thea. Like, sometimes you got to change it up a little bit, switch it up a little bit so you can get in there. Right. We have another question from DPP 48. If you would reveal yourself. I cannot see any of these people.
I had a question for Dr. Theo.
Why did you decide to go into healthcare and the medical business?
Oh, that's such a fundamental and very, very good question. Actually, one of the main reason, actually, I moved from studying engineering, mathematics and engineering, actually electrical engineering, into medicine. One of the things that enticed me was biomedical engineering. And those days, biomedical engineering was very in very infancy stage. So one really has to become a physician. So I went to study to become a physician first. But healthcare, in a sense, it's as you all know right now, especially with pandemic, everybody needs healthcare, and contribution to society via healthcare is probably one of the most fulfilling areas of what I've been feeling so far. And one of the things that changed me moving into public health / preventive medicine was when I was young and doing my internship after medical school. I was working or volunteering in the Sisters of Mother Teresa's orphanage centers, and they were an amazing group of people, nuns basically, and contributing. So they don't get paid. They wake up 4:30 in the morning, works until 9, 10, 11 in the evening, day in, day out, and contributes. The way I see them, I said, for us who are very lucky, can we do more to help? That's part of the reason why I moved into healthcare.
Wow, that was a very interesting story, Dr. Theo. Now, Miss Mixon's classroom can go.
Hi, can you hear us? Okay, Micah has a question.
Was there a specific item or memory that shapes you or what you're doing now?
I'll start. My grandfather, I mentioned my great grandparents both of my great grandmothers were born in the United States, but both of my grandfathers immigrated to the US at the turn of the century. And my paternal grandfather had a really difficult experience as a young person. He was 13 years old when he came over to the US. He was only educated through the 7th grade. He was detained at Angel Island in the San Francisco Bay. He lived in an apartment with 8 other people, probably working for 25 cents a day, just trying to stay alive. And his dream over his lifetime was to open a museum about immigration, and so that people could understand what people go through to, pick up your roots, pick up everything and leave everything behind. He left his mother and his siblings behind back in China, and to come to a place like the United States and try to really, start from zero. And he was never able to do that in his lifetime. So I think part of what I'm doing is continuing to tell his story, or stories like his, so that people don't forget and the history does not get erased. That is something very, very common, unfortunately, in the United States, that lots of history and experiences get erased in history books. So, do your research, and maybe you'll find stories that are very, very interesting.
I'll chime in. So I shared the story about my gung, my mom's dad, and how he said, never go empty-handed. But in addition to that, I would say that, I really listened to what stirred me as I was growing up and in my young adulthood. And the thing I couldn't step away from was dessert. And I know a lot of us probably feel that way on some level, but truly it was the place where I felt safest, where I felt the greatest sense of belonging, and where I felt the most creative. And, I think as you guys choose your careers, as potentially you start to choose your majors and things that you're really focusing your attention to, think about the thing that keeps you up at night. here I am, my company is now 17 years old. I've been in the food industry now for 30 years. I know it's shocking because I'm 32. But truly at midnight, I have to take down notes about ingredients, about a new dish, a new cake before I can go to bed. I've got to put those ideas to bed before I can go to bed. And what I wish for everybody is to find the path where they feel that way, where it's the thing. And I see Barry talking about film, and it's so clear that he's possessed with telling these stories. And same thing with Cynthia and HR. And it's just like, that's really the thing, is listen to yourself. Listen to what drives you every day, what excites you, not what you should do necessarily, but what really, really motivates you. And if you are motivated, if you're excited by something, you will be successful at it. Absolutely.
And let me add also by that, being excited in an area of what you like to do as young people. You see the jersey behind me with the 00. That's Joshua's jersey, his basketball player, and he wants to be joining the NBA. I don't know how we're going to be able to do that, but I keep on saying, well, that's your dream, go after. But he's pretty good in tennis too, so we'll see.
Yeah, I think what Valerie, Barry, Desmond, what they're all saying, I very much echo, you know. I think the only thing that I would add to that is, you know, things will also change over time, right? So if you're as lucky as Barry and Valerie to like figure out what your passion is early on and go after that, then that is a fantastic thing. I think some of us can take a more circuitous route to that, right? Where, you know, you have to actually experiment. You have to actually try different things to figure out what it is that is really true for you. And just, you know, being open to that and going through those, the different stages and not being afraid to try new things, I think is really important. Because when I was in college and chose my major, I didn't think that it would change so dramatically over the next course of the 25 years that I've now been in business, right? And you know, most people will shift their careers at least 2-3 times over their lifetimes, and that's okay. You know, nothing is ever set in stone. And I think one of the key things to remember is that we can all adapt and we can all flex. And what you do today doesn't have to define what you do tomorrow. But if you are lucky enough to find that like core motivating passion and to do that for your work, then work doesn't become work, right? So, and I think that's just a generally a good way to sort of like choose how you want to spend your time.
Could I add on to that that filmmaking was not my first career. It's my second career. So I had to live a little bit before I could become a filmmaker. It's something I always dreamed of doing, but I think I had to experience life a little more. And so to your point, Cynthia, yeah, don't be afraid to change. If you have a passion, just keep going for it.
Wow, thank you to all the panelists. I love how this is like slowly turning into a life advice session. You guys are also wise. Actually, Barry, leading into what you just said, we got a question asking you what motivated you to make your film Finding the Virgo?
So I was lucky enough to meet the woman that you see in the film that's crying, Lauren Voon, through a mutual friend, and she took me to lunch, and she told me this story that about her family fleeing from Vietnam, and then that she was on this journey, this mission, decades-long mission, to try to find the people that actually rescued her and thank them. And I was hooked at that moment, and I think I was very lucky that came to me. But otherwise, I'm always out there talking to people, looking for ideas, listening to people, listening for interesting stories, and I try to hear when I hear a story, I try to put myself in the audience's position. Is it a story that an audience can follow? Is it a story that has I'm sure what you guys are learning, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And if a story has those three things, you can make a pretty nice film out of it.
Wow, that's very interesting. So we have a question here. So if what um advice would you give to anyone who's part of the APPI community in middle school like now?
Let me start. And I think one of the first things is to continue the dialogue as what we're doing right now, and have more sessions like this in the future among yourselves. Ask questions and don't be afraid to to be bold and do the right things, right? And sometimes I'm sure in the future you're gonna be facing hurdles, but don't be afraid of it. That's how when you're young, such as yourself, be part of the journey. It's part of the journey, and I believe you guys are gonna do great, right?
Hi. I would say my number one thing for the AAPI middle schoolers out there is to take care of yourselves. This is an intense time that we're dealing with right now. You know, you guys have had a lot. You have had a lot in the last 14, 15 months. It's been really, really intense. I've got a middle schooler at home. Wow. It's a lot. And I think that particularly for our community, we're really starting to reconcile with our history in this country. And I'm sure that you guys are being confronted with a lot of new information. You're dealing with racist terminology that perhaps you've never even heard in your life, that you didn't know people used. And this is being really kind of catapulted towards all of you right now during an already vulnerable time. And it's a lot. So I would say, talk to your parents, talk to each other. And I do believe that, you know, through struggle comes growth. And every difficult time that I've lived through in my life, growth happens after that really uncomfortable time, right? And I would say that that's what's happening right now. Right now, the country's going through extreme discomfort. We are going through an extreme time of reckoning with the AAPI history, how this extraordinary subversive racism is coming to a head. And we're dealing with some really scary situations happening, particularly to our elders. So I would say, you know, if you're feeling vulnerable, if you're feeling nervous, again, go to your parents, go to your friends, find your support system right now. But also take this as an opportunity to learn about why this is happening and how we make productive change. To the non-AAPI people on this Zoom, I would say be a good ally. You know what I mean? If you hear words being spoken that you know are not appropriate, that you know could offend or hurt somebody, speak up, because it really is about all of us taking care of each other today and every day.
I think Valerie just summed it up really well, right? I think it's important for all of us as Asian American Pacific Islanders to understand our history, right? To Barry's earlier point, like understand the history of Asian Americans in this country, understand your own family history, understand, you know, the events that have led us to be who we are and where we are today. And the same thing absolutely applies to our non-AAPI friends, right? I think the more that you learn about history, the more that you learn about cultures that are different from your own, the more bridges can be built of understanding. across different communities. And I think that, it's important for us to all strive for unity, right? And support for each other as we think about not only the heritage and cultural differences that make each of us unique, but what are also the things that bring us together.
I hope you guys are taking notes out there, because those are some really wise words. And I would repeat the same things. I'd also say that if you have a chance, getting a seat at the table, fight for a seat at the table, meaning if you have a chance to lead, if you have a chance to, do what Sabrina's doing, maybe Phoebe will follow your footsteps later and lead. That is how we're going to make change. That is how we get representation. So if you have a chance to run for an election, if the teacher's looking for a volunteer, stand up, use your voice, use your body. And I think that's how we'll change. And the second thing I want to add also, though, is I've been lucky enough to travel all over the country, and I've traveled all over the world. And I found that 99% of the people on this planet are kind, they're well-intentioned, they're not hateful. And it's very easy to watch social media now, Facebook, Instagram, or the news, and feel like the whole world is out there evil. And I just honestly don't believe that that is the case. So go outside, make friends, travel, see the world, and don't be afraid.
Thank you for all that advice. So DPP9, you can go ahead with your question.
How much does ethnicity work with your personal life?
It's a good question, and a funny one, because I call my body a meat bag. It's just the thing I'm born in. It doesn't, but I can't escape it either. So as I said, if I travel around and I travel through the country, it's the first thing people see. And they will assume that I cannot speak English. They will assume that I'm not educated or not born in the country and not American. So unfortunately, I can't escape the meat bag. But once I open my mouth and I get to know these people, I think it's a lot better. So I think it affects me every day, but I also think that you can work around it.
And being in California this last 1 year, I also speak some Spanish. So when I meet some of our Californians and speak, they say, "Wow, you're Chinese, but you speak Spanish?" I said, "Yeah," and they thought us it was quite unique, in a sense. So language does break barriers if you can try to learn. Yeah.
I would say my mixed heritage affects my everyday life a lot. I primarily identify, as you've probably gathered, as Asian American. My father's culture really didn't, it just wasn't really shared with our family that much. So my influence was primarily Asian American. But I would say, being a person of mixed race, I would say the big freedom of that has been the ability of not fitting truly into any box, and really having the ability to create my own path and not follow specifically any predetermined set of rules for me or for now my family, and really just kind of looking creatively at what I want to experience in life, both professionally and personally.
Yeah, I think being Asian is just part of who I am. And most days I don't really think about it on a personal level. But there are definitely days where I have a push-pull relationship with being Asian. And usually that manifests itself from a generational perspective, right? Because my parents are very steeped in a sort of traditional Chinese cultural ways of thinking. And very often the way that I think can be at odds with that. And so I find myself like, whenever I'm interacting with other members of my family who don't share the same, being bicultural, born here trait as I have, right? That there's a gap, and that I'm always trying to figure out how to bridge that gap. Just because like the way that we, what we prioritize, what we value, how we approach problem solving can be really different, and try just working through that difference so that you can get to the common place or outcome. So, it's definitely, being Asian is like part of my life, but it's sort of, it only tends to come to the forefront when I'm sort of like immersed in it as part of my work, right? Or when I'm dealing with the cultural gaps that arise just in other more personal situations.
Thank you for all that. And Cynthia, gotta get that straight. And Cynthia, I gotta say that I actually really agree with what you said, because so at Wellington, we're trying to have these difficult conversations, right? And talk about these issues and talk about racial gaps and stuff like that. And something that one of my teachers has said to me is that, one of my white teachers has said to me is that the reason it's so important for us to talk about this and why it's so important for white people to talk about how people of color might feel is because waking up white, you don't think about it, right? You just go out and it doesn't affect your life. But you actually said, I wake up, being Asian is part of who I am. That's how I live my life. And I think that there actually needs to be more of that, like, this is who I am. This is the skin I was born in, and I'm proud of it, right? So I just really liked how you put that. To close it out, we have one last question from DPP 48.
Yeah, my question is for Mr. Fong. I was wondering what other movies or films that you've directed or.
Sorry, thanks for that question. I just finished a film. I've actually been working with Stanford University on a film about the Transcontinental Railroad. There were about 10 or 15,000 Chinese laborers that worked on the railroad. Between 2,500 and 5,000 of them died building the railroad through the Sierras. So Stanford University has been doing this international project to sort of create definitive records of those workers and where they came from and what they did afterwards. So I've been working with them. It's been 6 years, and my son was in middle school when we started, and now he's in college. So it's been a while, but the film is done. It's called Celestials, and hopefully it'll be on TV soon. We'll keep an eye out for it. And also there for you in Ohio, if you want to see Finding the Virgo, call your public television station. It's available to them. All they have to do is put it on the air. Thank you.
Well, I just want to say thank you to all the panelists, and thank you again for providing your time for this almost 1.5 hours. Also, thank you for providing incredible examples of APPI excellence. So students will now follow dismissal procedures, and teachers, don't forget to turn on your car lenses.
Thank you all for having us.
Thank you. And on behalf of the Wellington School, the faculty, I'd just like to thank all of the panelists for giving your time and talent to us today. We are so happy to be celebrating AAPI Heritage Month, and Wellington students, be on the lookout for more events. We have a film screening actually tomorrow in the BPAC. So thank you again, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, Sabrina.